Welcome to episode 11 of The Coin Pod, a weekly podcast featuring conversations with people around the world studying, using, and building Bitcoin. I'm your host, Zach Full. For this episode, Soona Amhaz is joining me as my co-host. Soona, thanks so much for recording this episode with me. It's awesome having you here.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
For this Coin Pod, Soona and I caught up with the brilliant Desiree Dickerson, currently the Blockchain and Digital Currency Fellow at Women for Women International, to chat about her work in the cryptocurrency space and her opinions on some controversial aspects of the space when broken down to its users, investors, contributors, etc. But before we jump into the conversation with Desiree, Soona, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, your work, and what led you to fall down the Bitcoin/cryptocurrency rabbit hole?
Yeah, I'm a CEO and co-founder of Token Daily, and it's a platform where people discover new token projects and launches and have discussions and deep dives around them to get more transparency and understanding around what's going on in the space and really follow the companies that they're invested in, their updates. And what we're trying to basically do is just shed light around a very troll-ridden space. And the way I fell down the crypto rabbit hole. All right, so let's take it back to, I think it was like 2013. I was at a Rap Genius party, and this is back when they were still Rap Genius. They hadn't dropped the rap yet, and it was a happy hour. And I remember like Fred from Coinbase was there, and everybody was like, "Oh yeah, he's working on Coinbase. Have you bought Bitcoin?" And I wish like I could say like at that moment I learned about Bitcoin and instantly knew it was going to change the world, but I didn't, and just was like, no, I've heard people like buy things on the Silk Road with it. I'm just not not of interest. I studied engineering at the University of Michigan, so was part of like that whole community. We were always on Reddit, kept floating up in conversations, and we would have like full on debates like is crypto going to replace the fiat system? Is this, it's like a complete full blown anarchy type of conversations, which are always fun to have in the morning. So I ultimately was I think when I actually like had shifted my perspective, I was like on a Reddit. It was a Reddit thread, and as someone was walking through, I was afraid to ask. Like I just didn't know, like how do you buy Bitcoin? And so like someone just asked him, like, thank you, like the hodl Bitcoin 44 for asking, because I was too embarrassed to ask my friends. And then I realized that you can buy like a fraction of a Bitcoin, and you don't have to buy the entire thing. And people were just really supportive of like helping this person figure out how to set up a wallet and actually get things going. So that's how I discovered crypto.
That's awesome, and absolutely no shame in not drinking the Kool-Aid your first time around. One last question for you though before we go to Desiree. Our conversation with her touches on the issues of gender dynamics and disparate sizes of cryptocurrency user demographics and that sort of thing. One related, somewhat less serious issue I'm curious to know your opinion on, though. Was or is Satoshi a woman?
The answer is yes. Like Satoshi is 100% a woman, and Satoshi seems like it's more masculine. Like she thought it through, like it was like to a science. It seems like it's more masculine, so it just makes sense they'd want to throw people off.
Gotcha. And to be honest, I'd be surprised if you were wrong about that.
Certainly.
Anyway, now that we have that settled, without further delay, here's Desiree. Desiree, thanks so much for coming on the show today. I'm looking forward to chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I am very excited and very honored to be a guest.
Before we jump into this episode, can you tell us a little bit about your Bitcoin story, a little bit of the work that you're involved in right now, and how you got involved in the blockchain/cryptocurrency space?
Yeah, most definitely. So my Bitcoin story is, I feel like I'm finding others who have similar introductions to Bitcoin, but I have always been kind of an avid Redditor, and I somehow stumbled upon the Dogecoin subreddit and really just fell in love with that community and just really had a lot of fun with it. And, after over a couple of years after finding that, I kind of just got really interested in the blockchain piece of it all, as well as the cryptocurrency, and kind of just, tried to learn and research as much as I possibly could. And then, I kind of just started helping out where I could with different folks in the space. A year ago when white papers were a legitimate thing, I tried to help out where I could on random projects. And then I really just started what I thought would be a professional Twitter and kind of, got involved in the crypto Twitter community. And then, I randomly stumbled on this job posting for a fellowship, this blockchain and digital currency fellowship with Women for Women International. And, I was like, oh, this is, a really great way to kind of explore blockchain and how it can be kind of transposed onto an organization or for an organization. And I can do it while helping a good cause. So I kind of jumped into that over the past 6+ months and have really just been working with the organization to figure out how they can leverage blockchain technology to empower their programs, which really aim to help women in post-conflict marginalized areas. So that's what we've kind of been working on, and we really focus on the financial use cases, mostly remittance payments and banking for the unbanked. So I've just been wrapping up a few things there, publishing some articles for the Philanthropy Journal. And it's been a really interesting ride. And, I'm involved in Write for 21 Cryptos and do some editing for Whale Reports. So it's been super fun.
That's brilliant. Now, I thought about a bunch of different ways how to sort of introduce the topic for today, the gender demographics of Bitcoin and the lack of balance therein. It's no secret that the male and female balance within Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, the so-called blockchain technology space as a whole, is rather unbalanced. Data from CoinDesk and a few other internet studies, polls, show that less than 2% of the entire user base are women. They're mostly 30 to 35-year-old white males. Less than 5% of respondents for some of CoinDesk's polls were female. Can you just tell us a little bit about your thoughts on that enormous topic as a whole, the imbalance of Bitcoin/cryptocurrency's gender demographics?
And I'd love to hear your thoughts on why it is the way it is right now.
Yeah, I think those are so many questions that are just extremely complex. And when I get asked this question, which is a lot, I do like to preface it with I can only speak to my experiences. I never studied gender studies, and I'm not an expert on this area whatsoever. And, I don't necessarily think that I'm the best person to speak on it. My experiences have been relatively positive. My whole academic background and much of my early work is in the sciences, so also a very male-dominated field. So I have been forced to feel comfortable, for lack of a better term, in situations that are more, or in industries that are more male dominated. So, I feel like I have been kind of welcomed with open arms in most situations. But, and I think one of the questions was, how did this happen? Or why, how did this problem come about? I think it's really just an institutionalized issue with the way that we educate women, young women specifically, which is really where I think is, when I was growing up, it was either an easy bake oven or creepy crawlers machine, right? They're so gendered heavy, and in the classroom, women are, pushed towards the home economics. And I always was as well. I mean, I was very lucky that, my parents bought me a creepy crawler machine thing. And, I kind of went down that path. But, it's really just kind of entrenched in society and the way that we teach women. So, I mean, I think I don't think anybody should be surprised that there's mostly men in this industry, because we're still seeing an after effect of, when women 20 years ago were being taught these things, now can make the choice to get into an industry that's evolving and growing like cryptocurrency. And they don't, because they still are still kind of shaped by how they were taught. So I think we're just really seeing the after effects of like how women were educated 20 plus years ago. And, I think there's still issues with that now. I think a lot of educators are addressing this issue, and, it seems to be a hot topic, but I mean, I that's my general opinion. And that's kind of always been my thought on that.
I think, Barbara Solzhenitsyn, the CEO and co-founder of India Hash, said something remarkably similar. She says, like, the lack of women relative to the amount of men working in the space is something of a generational educational effect that has a definite expiration date, and regardless of how disconcerting or just odd the imbalance may be right now, in the next 3 to 5 years, the number of women in the space is just going to explode exponentially. Is that, I guess, sort of along the same lines of what you're saying?
Yeah, I actually did not see that article before, but that's reassuring that someone else kind of has the same theory. I mean, that's exactly kind of my thoughts about it. I mean, I could be totally wrong. But I mean, that's kind of what I've seen, like, in the sciences, now, I mean, if I interact with kids who are in junior high or high school, I mean, I see a significant amount of more women or more girls who are interested in the sciences and technology. So, I think that there is a generational shift that we need to see happen before we see the numbers change drastically.
I see. That makes a lot of sense. Dovetailing off of the constructive building involvement in cryptocurrency and the blockchain space as a whole, something that's obviously directly tied to it is the investment in the space. Whether or not your career leads you to be involved, there's also an issue that's been highlighted with female involvement in investing in cryptocurrencies, just buying and holding cryptocurrencies. One reason that's been offered for why data show that women are not as prone to invest in cryptocurrency is risk aversion. Fintech expert Holly Golowetz says that women aren't as eager to invest in cryptocurrency, which when I was reading that, it brought to mind Alexia. I'm going to butcher her last name, but her tweet from January where she said women consider crypto, otherwise the men are going to get all the wealth again. Do you think this is a correct diagnosis of women being less prone to invest in cryptocurrency? Do you see that as something that's true? And if so, why? And if not, why?
I keep hearing that, that fact tossed around, but like I literally have never once seen a research paper on it. And I mean, I would absolutely love for someone to send it to me because I would love to read it. So, I mean, I can't really say if it's true or not. I tend to think there's probably, I mean, if it's just someone's opinion, then I have to probably disagree. But I mean, if there's some actual scientific evidence behind it, I'd just be really interested in the study. But I mean, I think, I don't think that's the case. I mean, I think it's like an educational precondition that we've been preconditioned to not be interested in finance and these type of topics. I mean, I've never once really seen any hard evidence that, women genetically are predisposed to like avoid financial risk more than men. I mean, I studied a lot of ecology and evolution in undergrad, and I suppose maybe there is some basis to risk aversion in terms of like strengthening offspring and whatnot. But in terms of financial risk, I mean, I've never, I think it's a little far-fetched.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of it has to do with like more of this self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, you know, people push this narrative and then you begin to believe it. Like maybe I am more risk averse and I don't. There's being told it enough kind of creates this vicious cycle where you know, even if you would consider investing, you've already been told you fit into this one mold, and it's just a dangerous narrative to keep pushing. Yeah, I guess those are my 2 cents. But yeah, Alexia's tweet was awesome. It's nascent enough and early enough that this doesn't have to be a gendered, yes, like finance traditionally, you know, has been more male dominant. Tech has been more male dominant, but this space is early enough that you, like, if we're intentional about, you know, the people you are seeing doing these, like, you know, that are writing reports, that are, like, you know, editing white papers, that are, you know, launching their own token projects, that are, you know, like you see, like Desiree, you see Meltem, Laura Shin, Linda, like all these amazing women at the forefront. And then you're just going to, on a subconscious level, be making that association. You don't need people to, you know, force or manufacture this, like, women should be included. You're seeing it. So there's a great opportunity here to correct whatever, like, false narratives have been, you know, like, unfortunately bought over the, you know, just like from the beginning of time, from the beginning of industrial times.
Most definitely. I think that speaks really to, you know, Zach's other question is, you know, what can be done to, like, help or correct or advocate. And I think that's a big thing. Like, you know, I don't ever, like, I see that comment all the time. I don't even bother wasting my time responding to it because it just draws more attention to whether it's true or not. It like you said, it's really unproductive rhetoric for the entire space, not just for women. And so, I mean, I just don't engage in discourse with things like that. And, you know, and I think like that's kind of how I've treated this always. And I'm always more than happy to talk about gender in the space and diversity in the space. But it's, you know, it's not necessarily my big platform. Like, I don't necessarily post about it a bunch on Twitter because I think, you know, more so me, like, just before I came on, like, retweeting and promoting, like, Noob Queen's work that she's been doing with 21 Cryptos. To me, like, that is a lot more effective, is to, like, get other people's work out there and get it known, and, you know, people seeing women performing in the space, just like you said.
Speaking of engaging in discourse, I just have to bring it up. I don't know what your DMs have been like or your tweet responses, but like, can we talk about, like, the troll ratio? I never get women or female trolls in my threads. It's primarily men that are that are just have, like, a lot of these, like, negative reactions to you know, to women speaking intelligently to crypto, which is also harmful. But
yeah, I mean, I would have said I've had, like, an overwhelmingly positive response. I do get a few, like, weird DMs. I did get, like, a flattering one asking me to go to prom. I didn't get asked to prom, like, millions of years ago, but thanks. No, but I do get a lot of, like, people DMing me or retweeting me to, like, supporting my work, which is, I think, means a lot more than the trolls. But I mean, recently I had, like, the most, like, master troll cyberbully, and it was the most awful experience. I don't know if it was a male or a female, but someone created like, another account with my image with a really horrible handle name.
Oh no!
I won't repeat for the sake of your show, Zach. But and they were, for a month, and I was unaware, writing on people's Twitters and, like, responding to actually, like, really respected people in the industry, like, pretending to be me. And a lot of it was attacking women. And I don't know if it was a man or a woman, but, like, Twitter didn't take the take the account down for 3 days after I found. And it was awful because this person was sending like fake photos, like they weren't obviously of me, but they were sending fake nude photos in return for Bitcoin. So people were messaging me being like, hey, if that's not your account, how do I get my money back? And I was like, oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so that has really been like the biggest issue that I've dealt with. I mean, which was just like, I would not wish that on anyone just because, you know, they're kind of like attacking my credibility in the space. You know, I may see it happening to other folks. So necessarily like gender focused, but I mean, they were attacking other women. And I mean, that's just like not helpful visibility if it looks like I am like telling other women they're like horrible and stupid. I get tons and tons of requests to review folks, you know, their white papers for their ICO, and which is just like incredibly annoying. And also like, you know, I've been literally heads down writing like a huge paper for this nonprofit. And it's just like the fact that like you didn't catch on to the fact that I'm like, don't probably have like the environmental knowledge to like do you any justice. Like I've really narrowed down like kind of my crypto holdings so I could focus on this. And so I'm like, you're just spamming me at this point. So like that's been really annoying as well.
Yeah. The only qualifier I ever have when people ask me to review their white papers is to make sure they don't list me as an advisor anywhere, because that's, I mean, you have that risk, you run that risk these days. But speaking of, so you were speaking to a lot of the work you've done around philanthropy in the space, and I'm curious like what your favorite projects are. I know like Connie, for instance, spearheads BitGive, but curious as to what you've been especially fond of.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like so many, you know, organizations forming that are really trying to take this space forward. You know, I think like BitPesa is like a really cool, you know, really simple, straightforward platform that, you know, have gained a lot of traction. And Walla is, you know, a really cool project as well. There is one that I think has a lot of potential, at least the idea is called Spen. And I mean, it's a permissioned blockchain, which isn't my favorite, but they do a lot of cool stuff that's really applicable to more remote areas. So like you can, like there's a location-based tracker to like see who in your area is willing to like, you know, transfer digital cash into like fiat. So they can actually go spend it somewhere. So that, you know, it's like almost like an Uber for ATM. So there's like some really cool functionality that people are building out. But, you know, then again, like that was like my whole kind of message and like the blog post that I just put out for the Philanthropy Journal is, you know, like especially when nonprofits and these humanitarian organizations are looking to implement some type of like blockchain solution, and they have to be really smart about not really veering off from their mission. I mean, you're here to serve people. You're not here to like invent technology or like be a leader in emerging tech. So, you know, a lot of resources can be wasted like following these dreams to like have these buzzwords on your website. So that was kind of like my whole spiel from like looking at these nonprofit organizations over the past 6 months.
Yeah. And I'm going to include a link to your article in the show notes. The article is titled "What Nonprofits Need to Know About Blockchain Humanitarian Use Cases." And you touch on it a little bit in the article, but I'm curious to know your personal opinions and then also sort of your professional, what your professional advice would be to nonprofits who ask you, like, which blockchain should I use to build X or Y thing that we want to build? Like, do you have any sort of soft maximalist inclinations towards a particular coin or blockchain, or how do you advise them, given that everything in the world doesn't necessarily need a blockchain or need to be tokenized or something like that? How do you advise these nonprofits approaching that whole mass of decisions that need to be made, and maybe the realization that a blockchain isn't necessary whatsoever?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And I've actually been thinking of writing a piece that's, has a larger scope than just nonprofits, because I think a lot of what I learned is applicable to most organizations that aren't technology focused, so to speak. I'm pretty agnostic. I mean, just my personal opinion is, public blockchains are the way to go. But I mean, that being said, I think most organizations can solve their problems without a blockchain solution. And a lot of people are just doing it to do it and somehow use it as a marketing tool. So I think that's the big thing, to really evaluate what the problem is and make sure that whatever solution is brought about really aligns with organizational mission and values. Because it can get pretty murky. And I think one of the big things is, if you're not a technology company, you're not planning on dumping millions of dollars in resources into some type of team to deploy something. I think really looking for partnerships and pre-existing technology that was one of my big things. For women, once they've kind of created this technology foundation that I have built out a roadmap for them for. They can, I've made some partner recommendations, okay, these folks, this group already has a technology that you can kind of just plug and play, and you can work with them really closely to make sure that it works with your organization without having to hire 12 people to do something like this. So, and I think, the technology, I don't have any really specific technology recommendations, but more so I think the strategy and kind of a measured approach towards looking at blockchain, I think that's really key. And the technology really is more organization and problem specific.
I see. That makes sense. I want to sort of circle back to something we touched on earlier, and that was potential efforts to remedy the gender dynamics in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and the blockchain space. And we mentioned, obviously, how maybe time itself will be just a key catalyst to solving this issue. But I'm curious to know what your specific recommendations are to friends or colleagues or what have you who ask you, Desiree, should I buy Bitcoin? And Desiree, what do I read or who do I listen to? Who do I follow to learn about cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and other coins, projects, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think when people ask me if they should invest in cryptocurrency, my answer is always yes. It doesn't have to be a lot, but it's such an interesting interesting shift in how we're viewing financial systems, and then even outside of that, just smart contracts brings about a huge new world of opportunity. So just even if just getting on Coinbase and getting an account and just seeing that there's other ways, there's other ways of transacting, I think that that's really important. And I think it's really empowering. The first time that I bought Bitcoin or, bought something with Bitcoin, even if it was just something as little as a shirt, I think that's, was so empowering to me to know that we don't at some point have to be dependent on, central banks and government funded institutions. So, I think that's extremely important. But that being said, I really don't appreciate when people are just how do I buy Bitcoin, or how do I do this or that? And so I'm just how I figured it out was just Googling it and, finding my way down the, rabbit holes, everyone says. But I think now there's a lot less useful. There's a lot of information out there now, but you kind of have to weed through it. So I think, I actually wrote a Medium article with a bunch of different links on it, which you're welcome to throw in the show notes as well. But I think Medium, people are constantly posting like really interesting articles on how to get into it, how to like open up wallets, like, you know, how to use a decentralized exchange, and also on YouTube as well. And I think one of the things I really stress is like there's not one way to learn this. Like I've never just read one article and knew how to do it, or like watched one YouTube video and immediately went and implement what I learned. Like I think it's really important to use several different resources to like really ensure that you understand what you're doing from several different angles, and then go and try and do that. So I mean, I think like just Google searching, Medium, YouTube, like Reddit. I mean, there's so many resources out there. And I mean, on Twitter, there's so many people just like giving out free, really, really smart information. Like the world is people's oysters. You'll be able to find what you're looking for.
Sure. Yeah. Not that I'm at all biased, but one source that curates a bunch of that free information regularly is Token Daily. And one post that is something actually I wanted to ask you, Desiree, and you too, Soona, even though you sort of already commented on this thread. But the question that was posed for this discussion was, who are some of your favorite women thought leaders in crypto? And I'm curious to know, who are some of your favorite female developers and policy analysts and marketing directors and all of this stuff who have a role in the cryptocurrency space and are doing phenomenal work that you look up to and admire and recommend for other people to look up to and admire similarly?
I mean, I think Laura Shen was always a big one for me early on. And just, you know, her writing is really succinct, and, you know, you can grasp exactly what she's saying. She's really good at kind of forming ideas in your mind. And in her podcast, like Unconfirmed, you know, and everything she puts out is she's such a thought leader, and, you know, there's in my opinion, very little bias, and she just puts out like high quality content. So, I mean, she is definitely like one of my go-tos. And then, I mean, like Elizabeth Stark is like such a badass. She's amazing, doing like really like industry leading work. And, you know, despite your thoughts on Lightning and all of that, I mean, you can't disagree. She's just like a force to be reckoned with, and is going to really push this space forward. And then, I mean, Meltom and Amber Balde, I don't know if that's actually how you spell her last name, not having met most of these people in real life. You know, they're just like following them on Twitter and seeing what they're doing, and it's just like extremely inspiring. I just like all these women are just like, I really look up to them and admire what they do. And, you know, I'm so excited to see like kind of where they go with the projects that they're working on right now.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback onto that. That is a rock star list. And if I was going to add to that, it'd also be Jing, who's the executive director at Blockchain Education Network, and Lindsay Mall, who headed cryptocurrency research at Precursor, and now is running her own fund, Luna Capital. And then also Preeti Kasireddy, she's has, speaking of Medium articles, like hers are consistently high quality, and she's a blockchain developer. And then Linda over at Scalar, and Eva, if you guys, she flies a little bit under the radar, but just like she's a force. She's over at Amisco. So those are some other really influential women I look up to.
I mean, honestly, the more people that you say, the more women that I can think of. So, I mean, I think like, yeah, okay, sure. Women, you know, we're less than 2% apparently in crypto and blockchain. But I mean, the women who are here are like putting out really, really quality work. And so I think that's like really important too. Like, hey, if we're not going to be about quantity, like we for damn sure are like coming in full force with the quality piece.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, snaps to that 100%.
I agree completely. And I'm curious if you think, you sort of mentioned it when we started this conversation, but whether or not the idea of, I mean, maybe this whole episode for that matter, but the idea of chatting about the problem of gender demographics is even a conversation or a narrative worth continuing, a conversation worth having, rather than just focusing on the work that they're doing and sort of ignoring the fact that there is a gender imbalance. Do you see what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's helpful to be like kind of, if you're at an organization, it's kind of helpful to, look introspectively and say, is there a good gender balance here? And, is there a fair amount of diversity, productive amount of diversity in our organization? So I think it's helpful to a helpful thought to keep in the back of our minds. But I mean, I don't think it's constructive to constantly be talking about every single day. And I think once we're always kind of oh, here's the really great work that women are doing, I don't think that's a useful narrative at all. I mean, it's just work of people who are doing a lot in this space. I think it's important for us to tackle once and then move on and be done with it. If it rears its ugly head again, where, there's crazy Twitter fights or bad things happening at conferences, maybe something, someone calls someone out and there's something done about it. But, I think Melton had a really a neat tweet where she had kind of identified companies with boards or executive teams, and she kind of really pulled out the numbers and was like, hey, there is literally 1 out of 12 people who is a woman on this board. What? And she called them out. And, I think that's important, but, that's not her platform. She touches on it and then she moves on and does her thing. So, I mean, that's kind of my thing. Let's address it, be done with it, and then move on and start thinking about the technology and thinking about how we're going to, move this forward as a collective group and kind of, nip it in the bud and be done with it.
Completely agree. The first step in solving any problem is admitting there is one. And then just heavily working on after that acknowledgement to not keep pushing the narrative and get caught in this model where it's, it's forever recognized as just a male dominated space, because then you still do feel like an imposter. Even if you're a trailblazer, you do feel everyone's telling you that you are the minority. So even if it's getting better, you still believe you're the minority. Every panel that has and I'll just draw a similarity to in tech, every panel of women at a tech conference, I don't have to hear any audio. I already know they're talking about being women in tech. And but then it's a pleasant surprise when when they're actually just talking about the tech. I never see a panel of men. I'm they're talking about being men in tech. They're just discussing the tech. So I'm curious, Desiree, if when you're approached for speaking opportunities, at conferences and panels, how has that played out? Are you asked to speak more to the issues from a gender perspective, or do you get to? Is it more about an actual topic, or is it a good mix of both?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question, because when I look at the events that I do or the podcasts that I speak on, I do find that maybe it's 50-50. If I speak on a panel, I've done 2 panels on, women in blockchain or women in crypto. But, I really try and go towards the topics. I'll give a talk about the work that I'm doing. And obviously the work that I'm doing, the nonprofit, focuses on women, but that's not the point of the technology, right? I think that's a problem. I have been asked more often than I think could be to only speak on gender. I think it's important, and right now it's really relevant. But I think at some point we need to maybe collectively start saying, okay, this is a women in blockchain group, but let's not just talk about women in blockchain. Let's just be here. It's a comfortable space for women to talk about nothing besides technology. And then again, I don't know how other women feel. Clearly we're kind of on the same wavelength, and the more and more I do talk about it, I find there to be similar sentiment out there. But, I also don't want to, lessen anybody else's voice and say how feeling a different way than me is any less. So, that's where it gets tricky for me. Like, I don't want to be too vocal about saying, hey, let's stop talking about gender. Let's talk about the work when other people feel the need to talk about it.
Certainly. I agree with that.
Before we go, Desiree, can you and Soona, can you tell us where our listeners can follow you and your work? On Twitter and elsewhere, after listening to this episode, and stay up to date with the things you're doing?
Yeah, for me, it's definitely my Twitter. So at Dickerson_Des. That's I post everything there, and I post most frequently there. Feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. Please don't follow me on Facebook or request me on Instagram. I have so many crypto requests on Instagram. It's so frustrating. Twitter is the place to find me.
I'm Soona or later on Twitter. So it's SOONA and then or later. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. I'm never on Facebook. And my website is tokendaily.co.
Well, thanks so much, guys. This has been an absolute blast. I can't thank you both enough for coming on and chatting about the variety of things that we've talked about. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you both so much. This episode of The Coin Pod has been a production of You, Me, and BTC. Special thanks to Soona for hosting this Coin Pod with me, to my colleagues Tim Baker and Daniel Brown, and of course to Desiree. If you've missed any previous Coin Pods, you can catch up and learn more about the show by following @TheCoinPod on Twitter or visiting thecoinpod.com. We'll be back next week with another episode, so until then, cheers.